So, Jason, we have a guest today.
We do. I'm excited.
Yeah, most definitely. So, Matt, we wanted to sit down with you. We've had two vlogs so far, so we're just getting started. But we thought it would make sense for us to take a step back and kind of give a bit of information about kind of who we are, what we're doing as a company. For those that have been listening or those who are kind of coming to the vlog, for them to have an opportunity to kind of get to know us a little bit. So we thought having you on would be a great way to do that. Obviously, we want to have more and more guests, on our show as we move forward. But we wanted to start with that. And I think what we want to do today is we had a great conversation earlier about the state of fundraising software, for nonprofits. Software, how different software companies are serving nonprofits. And I think you have some interesting thoughts to kind of share on that topic. So we wanted to kind of spend, a few minutes here talking about that. And I think through that, kind of giving people a bit of an introduction to kind of who we are. Would you mind, you want to kind of get us started, share some of the thoughts you had?
I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. And, one of the things that's great is my son and I were looking at Dude Perfect, one of the most popular YouTube vlogs or channels. And we went back to their original first video. So I'm hoping that, in 10 years' time, we come back to this one. And this is, where it all starts.
Once we have 50 million subscribers.
We don't need 50 million views right away.
That's right.
But next week is fine.
But the humble beginnings, right? Yes. So, well, I appreciate you having me on. Automation is really important to me, and I think where the future of fundraising is going for nonprofit organizations. But I'll kind of give you, I guess, my perspective on software. When we first started in 2001, software companies were coming out of that .com era, and the real focus was how do we make money in the nonprofit space. And even still today, you look at finance people, you look at software folks, very infrequently do fundraising professionals jump ranks into the for-profit world, start a software company that's from their perspective. Usually it's financial people that want to get into SaaS software, they want recurring revenue, and really it's about, and they don't hide it very well, that they want to make money in this marketplace. And I think that, it's one thing to just be focused on profits, but I think it's also, you have to care about the market that you're serving. And so sometimes some organizations are pretty, they're pretty good at covering up for that. I think some organizations, love nonprofits. But then when you think about publicly traded companies, the biggest ones, they're really beholden to the street. The requirement for them is to grow at, 25% a quarter. They've got demands on them because of shareholders. And so one of the things I think is a challenge is what's best for a nonprofit isn't always best for profits.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I think there's some tension, because everybody wants to sell the next thing. They want to upgrade you to the next level. They're always coming out with something shiny, and I don't know that is exactly what serves the marketplace the best.
Hey,
go ahead.
Well, I'd be interested in asking you to potentially characterize. So that's almost 20 years ago. You framed the first conversation. So in the last 20 years, the more mature nonprofits have been adopting software. I'd love for you to, characterize sort of the typical more mature nonprofit and their interaction with software. And then secondarily, you're an entrepreneur. If you were to start a nonprofit and you were growing, how would you make decisions about software?
Well, I think things have matured, right? At the beginning, there were tools that solved specific problems. Back then, it was this new thing called the internet and email. And if you look at really the growth of software from, IBM having DOS on it to where we are today, obviously tools that made things easier for folks were out there. What's really matured is those tools have become much easier to use. And I think we're seeing what we've always seen. Corporate world is always 10 to 15 years ahead. They're showing us the way on how to utilize software to get the kind of efficiencies that we want. And so you see that in marketing automation, for example. HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, all these groups have helped organizations grow tremendously. And now finally, nonprofit organizations are saying, okay, we need to automate some of these things that are routine so that we can spend more time on our mission. And so to answer your second question, I think that if I was in a nonprofit organization right now, I would want to take advantage of as much automation as I could so that my staff isn't bogged down with a lot of manual tasks. And I know those things are possible. The problem is, we have staffs that turn over every 18 months. It's hard to find people with a certain specialized expertise. I mean, you can always find somebody that's a millennial who knows social, but it's hard to find somebody who's been around and understands marketing automation that really can say, okay, strategically, how do I use this? And so a lot of times people are paying a ridiculous amount of money for a glorified email system that they could probably get for cheap or free with MailChimp. And, I almost feel like the promises of marketing automation haven't been fulfilled because there hasn't been anyone to really help shepherd that. And so, that's a hard skill set to find.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think we've heard firsthand from clients we serve, and obviously we're in the higher education vertical, we're in the ministry nonprofit vertical. We serve large and small, and as I think about organizations that are potentially spending or budgeting, say $500,000 to $5 million on fundraising, marketing, and those types of initiatives each year, not all of them have sophisticated internal shops that can embrace marketing automation software, and they struggle because of that. So where do they go, and who do they turn to, for help?
Yeah, and really that's the way we've organized ourselves is, there's this really interesting, duality or balance between, knowing who you can trust. I often say you don't go to your software company for fundraising strategy. And that's in some cases unfortunate because there's some good people that are in software companies. But it's really the strategic that should drive what the tools do. And so often, because there's so much more resources put into and there's scalability and marketing dollars and investments made in pushing software tools that are going to change your life, I mean, it's notorious. I mean, how many times have you looked over somebody's shoulder using Microsoft Excel and they're doing something that you have never done before and you're like, oh my goodness, I wish I knew that. It would save me some time. It's the same thing, is that the more sophisticated you get with software, the more requirement it is for people to be educated on how to use it. And that's just what, quick shortcuts in Excel. If you look at automation, though, that's one of the promises of automation is that you can essentially bake this stuff in. You can lock it down. You can set things up. So when a new name comes in, a new donor comes in, when somebody changes to a new level, someone hits a certain threshold, you can, fire off a notification to the right people. You can send a welcome series. You can acknowledge that gift in a timely way. And to me, that's really, the goal is to get to this point where the donor is delighted because they know that you're being proactive, you're being sensitive, you're being appropriate to the gift. And so to me, it's certainly an idealistic scenario, but I believe that the tools are now in a place where they could really help us do well.
Yeah, but I think you're hitting on an important point that no matter how easy to use the tool might be, so it may make it easy to set up an email or to set up a campaign automation, it's not going to provide the strategy or the know-how behind that, right? So there is an expertise that's developed over time that enables you to know how to react to a certain situation through automation, how to respond to that through automation. Yeah. That's not something that can be brought to you out of the box necessarily. It's something that has to be learned or provided to you by an expert that's already been there and done that.
Yeah, and there's the way I look at it is everything's driven by the methodology that you have. And so you have a strategic methodology. Your methodology is generally rooted in key either performance indicators or the goals of your organization. So for example, you want to make sure that your organization is healthy. And so the way we approach things is not saying, hey, what tools are at our disposal? What should we do? And that's very common. You get young people, they're very excited about doing things. They have all sorts of great ideas. But it might be a great giving day, and the success of that giving day might be celebrated by the organization, but it may not actually be very strategic because we're not prepared for all of those new donors. And so one of the ways we approach it, and I think you're getting to the point which is so critical, is starting with this methodology. Where do we want to go? What is our strategic vision? What are our goals? And then being able to align our efforts and the systems to make it accomplish that. And so what we use as a methodology is really this health report concept, is that we're looking at key performance indicators that everyone should be measuring. It determines your health, and then saying, okay, what would I do in this scenario? Well, I've got to make sure that my new donors are greeted well, educated about the organization through a welcome series, and then I'm getting to the point where they're making that next gift, they're becoming a key multi-year donor or a sustaining donor. And so I want to work them through this journey in a systematic way. And the problem is a lot of times organizations don't have a fundraising strategic methodology. And it's not like, that's not a very difficult thing, but it's something that if you've got it in place, it drives what your young people with great ideas do.
Yeah. So I think to bring this back, I want to get back to Jason's question real quick, because I think it's important. If you are a nonprofit leader and you're looking to dive into automation, potentially looking at different software solutions that are out there for marketing automation, what are some of the things you need to think about before you really make the decision to move forward? Because I think there's some important things that the organization should be prepared for, or it could actually be harmful to your team to bring in a new software solution when you're not ready.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very common that we buy software thinking it's going to solve the problem, and we don't realize that people, expertise, all of those things need to be in place. And, even the earlier issue of the turnover in staff is you invest all this time, send people to conferences or training, and then they leave. And so being able to have the right staff support. And then I also think, utilizing consulting and coaching in a way that's very focused on what your end result is. I'm not a big fan of just having people on retainer. I think what you need to say is, okay, we know that there are 7 different journeys that someone goes through. There's these points, what we call traps and triggers. There's these key points that if I have automations that are set up for those, at least the system's going to, send me a notification and raise the flag to say, hey, this is important. And so to me, I think you have to make sure you've got the appropriate amount of staff to manage the tools that you have, to take advantage of the things that the company is promising. And a lot of times these promises are, oh yeah, if you get our software, you'll be able to do these things, but you don't realize that, well, it takes a different way of thinking. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with marketing automation is it's a whole different paradigm than email marketing.
Well, I was going to say, I think you're completely right. We've, as I mentioned before, so we've had clients who've told us that, I've wasted maybe a year, maybe 2 years on the software product when my team was already at full capacity. We didn't have the expertise in-house. And so just plopping this software right down in the middle of our organization created more problems than it helped. And so really, I think in that case, they were attracted to partnering with us because we could come alongside, provide that expertise, put that strategy in place and the program in place that would then take better advantage of their automation software. One question I have for you, though, is I know you've talked a little bit about donor health report. You've talked about traps and triggers. Do you have 1 or 2 examples of specific things you've seen in that donor health report or automation points that are kind of rising to the top in terms of priority? What should you be concerned about as a nonprofit?
Yeah, so one of the things I've always said is the number one indicator of health in an organization is the growth or decline of your key sustaining donors. And a key sustaining donor is somebody who's given to you for at least 3 years in a row. And you look at that group, that's about 80% of all revenue comes from people who have been sustaining donors. We spend so much time and effort on acquiring new donors, which you have to do, acquiring new names. But the biggest problem I see in organizations across the board is what they do with that donor who is between their first gift and essentially their 3rd year of giving, of becoming a sustaining donor, because the retention rates of a sustaining donor are upwards of 75%. And that's been consistent across the organizations that we've looked at. The problem is there's this huge amount of churn. You bring in all these new people, let's say a Great Giving Day, and it goes really well and everyone celebrates, but then they don't have a plan for how do we welcome them? How do we upgrade them? How do we offer them a monthly opportunity? How do we differentiate ourselves? And Jason's had a great experience with an organization that his wife supports, where they made a point of differentiating at a certain time in the giving process that really made a difference to Cheryl. So I feel like that's what the automation in the process can really help, but it's really targeting this issue of let's understand who pays the bill and let's invest in growing that group But in order to grow that group, we have to do a really good job of building awareness. We have to bring in names. We have to then transition donors and get them to the point where they've been giving in a period of at least 3 years. And then the retention rates go through the roof. We're talking differences between 30% retention and 75% retention. And so that's probably the most general observation that's been made. And so that's why having a strategic methodology, and in our case, it's this donor health report where we're looking at these key metrics. And to be honest with you, it simplifies nonprofit management when it comes to fundraising, because you only have about 4 levers to pull, and then you can be creative around that. And that's really the issue, is that we see the creative coming first of ideas without the strategic alignment with the methodology.
Well, I can give you a couple quick examples. One of the groups we work with, we're actually using the donor health report to dictate the priority in rolling out the automation sequences. So where are the key areas that they need attention? And the donor health report guided that rollout of marketing automation. The other one that I thought was super interesting, we have a group we work with that had a record-breaking year for 3 years in a row. They had a groundbreaking giving day. They had incredible $3 million renewal on lapsed segment. But they are also in a campaign, so they've tapped out all their major donors. To your point about the sustaining group, that's where your future mid and major donors are going to be. And so when we drill down on some of their key categories that lead into the sustaining donors, we saw some deficiencies. So for a group that's going to want to even stay even the next year in a group, in a scenario like that, they're going to have to work on one pipeline of major donors. How do they cultivate the sustaining group to prepare them potentially to have a more personal, intimate relationship with the organization? And then how do you consistently drive people up into that place?
Yeah. And what that speaks to, and we've talked about a lot, is this idea of disproportionate investment. Is I may have this huge file. Where do I spend my time and effort to get the result that I want? And so a lot of what this methodology of the donor health report does is it says, okay, we're going to drill down into this segment that's at a critical time. They've given, let's say, their second gift. How do I get them from a 30% retention rate over that third year into a sustaining donor that's going to have a 75% increase? Their average gift is going to be higher. And so if I were to say to you, you've got 100,000 records, but I'm going to tell you the 1,700, that if you spend time, effort, energy, and disproportionately invest in these folks, it's going to dramatically increase not only next year, but the following years because of that strong retention rate. And so I think a lot of nonprofit leaders are asking the question, show me the levers to pull. And if I pull them, it actually has an impact. Right now, I feel like there's a lot of, they're being kind of tossed by the wind by new fancy ideas, tools, channels like social and all this stuff, trying to figure out something that works. We've shown that this is proven. This works when you invest in these segments. And the cool thing about it is it's not like you have to invest in 50,000 people. It's a targeted group of people to get a certain result. And that, to me, that's why it comes back to trust, is that having somebody that can help guide you through that process isn't software, but you can't do it without the tools.
Yeah, most definitely. So you've mentioned donor health report, you've mentioned methodology. Since you are our first guest on the show, and we'll do this for everyone, we'd love to know, where can people find out more about these ideas? What's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so FrazierFundraising.com is probably the best place, to get into contact with us. One of the things I think I would love to share with anyone is I would like to invite them to, for example, webinars that we have. So we share a number of webinars around what we call giving automation. And the things that I've just talked about really fit into that category of what is giving automation. You've heard of marketing automation. How do we take that into a donor paradigm and make it work for organizations? And there's some really key things that have to happen in order for that to work. And so, obviously get in contact with us through the website, but the other one would be attend a webinar, understand what we're talking about. And I think those that are really serious about moving their organization in investing in a long-term growth strategy really need to pay attention to how automation is going to impact their organization in the future. It's going to give them more time to focus on their mission and their programs and less on basically manually shuffling paper and lists and names and those type of things.
Yeah, now's the time to get into automation. The for-profit market is already there. Your donors expect that because they're consumers of other companies, and they expect that through their consumer relationships. So this is something that's here to stay. It's something you need to utilize, whether you're trying to improve or whether you're healthy and you just want to maintain at the end of the day. So, well, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. We hope to have you back more often. And we will we'll talk to everybody on the next episode.
See you later.
Thanks.
Peace.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.